Sean Glover stands as a distinguished figure in the music industry with a career that spans recent decades. As the Director of Industry Relations at SoundExchange, the Governor of the DC chapter of the Recording Academy, and recognized as a Billboard R&B hip-hop power player, Sean has become a pivotal personality in transforming the way artists navigate the digital music landscape. His career is marked by a deep commitment to advocating for the rights of artists, ensuring that they are fairly compensated in an era where digital streaming dominates. In his role at SoundExchange and with the Recording Academy, Glover has been at the forefront of addressing some of the most pressing challenges facing musicians today, including copyright issues, royalty distribution, and the impact of technology on creative industries. His efforts have not only contributed to the financial well-being of countless artists, but have also fostered a greater understanding and appreciation of the value of music in our lives. Sean has a lifelong friendship with one of the acclaimed hip-hop artists of today, Common, bringing together his professional and personal worlds, intertwined in creativity, support, and collaboration that benefits the music community as a whole. I'm Damon Davis, and this is my Discovery Diary with music industry innovator, Sean Glover. Sean, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Oh man, Damon, thanks for having me.
So I'm excited to have you here because one of the things that I realized in preparing for this is I don't really know how you got into the music industry. So I'd love for you to just take me back a little bit and tell me about how you even made this entrance into music at all.
Sure. I always say that everybody is in the music industry, whether you're on the professional side or the consumer side, because that's one thing that unites us all. Let's say the pandemic showed us what united us. So let me go back. I say there's three things that unite people, no matter what your religion is, race, sexual orientation, and that's food, sports, and music. So the pandemic happened. There were no restaurants weren't open. There were no sports happening, but we still had music, and it was a coping mechanism. So I say everybody's in the music industry in some capacity, but for me, it started when I got out of college. I worked at KPMG, Pete Marwick, big accounting consulting firm in the world, but it was pretty regimented. It was what I needed, but it showed me the business of business, like really straightforward, regimented. This is how it works. But I knew in my heart that it was like blue suit, white shirt, black shoes, blue tie every day. It just didn't feel right to me. But it was great money. I exceeded all my expectations. I was like, this is cool, but it wasn't fulfilling. Our practice got sold to a consulting firm, and it was a lot of travel, and it was cool at first, but I was waking up in cities, man, you had no drawers. It was like, I gotta go buy underwear. I stayed in the filings basement and stuff like that.
Piecing your
Man,
life together on the road.
yeah, man. Yeah, our practice was in Arizona, so I'm going to different time zones. It was just not good. So I took a job at Lombardi Cancer Center in Georgetown in their accounting finance department. And that was the moment, and I'll tell you why. I had an intern by the name of A. Marie. I'm sorry, she was a work study student worker. So at Georgetown, you don't find student workers because a lot of those kids don't need the money. You know, and so if you get a student worker, you're like, wow, yeah, this is gold. So she used to walk by my office every day, her headphones on, baggy the baggiest of sweatpants. It was just college student slumming it. So one day she stopped, every cordial with everybody in the office. She said, hey, you guys need any help? And everybody jumped up. Yeah, hell yeah. So I became close with her. She told me her aspirations of being a singer. I told her she'd never make it. I was just crushing all type of dreams.
Dang.
Because over the years, I got to know her family. Her dad's military dad, knew her mom's Korean. These are good people, man. They're almost family. And at the same time, I had a childhood friend, Rashid, is also known as Common, he had 2 albums out. And I was like, the math wasn't that. I thought it's because you were on BET, you had a video, you were rich, like most people. And I thought, yeah, the song on the radio, you have some sort of celebrity and popularity that equal fortune, but fame does not equal fortune. So I started asking him, I was like, how does the money work? And I also had a good friend named Kiana Johnson, who we call her KJ, but she was also in the music biz, and she sung with Heavy D, Notorious B.I.G. She wrote some with everybody, and she's still in the business today. But had these three people in my life, and I didn't understand how the money worked, and I was just curious beyond belief. And at that time, I'm going to date myself, but that's when I call it the music industry flipped on its head. When file sharing became a thing, everything went digital. So I don't know if you remember the Napster, the Grokster, LimeWire. It was really
Yeah.
Napster first.
All those peer-to-peer platforms
Oh my
where we made
goodness,
this
man.
transition from buying records and cassettes to actually people having the ability to put a record on your computer, and you could basically just share it back and forth, and nobody had to pay for anything. If one cat paid for it, everybody had access to it with impunity.
No problem. And you can have all your music on something as big as a credit card, a little bigger than a credit card. So we can share a file. Oh, Damon, check this song out. Boom, I can just email it to you. That changed the game. That was the revolution, the digital music revolution. To your point, the stakeholders who own those things, those rights to those musics, were making a lot of noise. And there was a woman by the name of Hillary Rosen, who was the head of the RIAA at the time. I had no idea what this was, but I was like, wait a minute, they're in Washington, D.C. So I was like, who is this little white lady making all this noise? Like, she is a fighter. And I just started just following, reading newspaper, just looking online. I see her on TV fighting for rights, and I reached out to her. Now, Damon, I said the term reaching out, but let's just say the stalking laws weren't as strong as they are now. So I was aggressive, but I reached out to him, and I was like, man, there was something entertainment in Washington, D.C. People think of D.C. as a politics town, and it is, but there's so much more. So I reached out to Hillary. I was like, man, I want to work there. I was completely transparent. I was like, I don't know shit. I don't know, but I do know I can read, I can learn. I
Right.
can learn how to read.
Teach me everything.
To all you kids out there, reading is fundamental. But she said, look, we don't have anything here, but there's this new thing called SoundExchange that's coming where you can help there. You may be able to help there. And basically what happened was Congress said that for AM/FM radio, for those who don't know, when a song is played on AM/FM radio, the performer doesn't get paid. So, for example, you hear "I Will Always Love You" by Whitney Houston. When it's played on the radio, Dolly Parton, who wrote that song, gets paid, but Whitney, who performs it, doesn't. So,
So the
rewinding back,
songwriter gets paid, the performer does not on
does
FM
not.
radio.
And let me go back a little further. Everybody who works on the radio, I'm talking about the person who sweeps the floor, who answers the door, the disc jockey, the producer, everybody gets paid on radio except the performer because of this loophole in copyright law. So what Congress did, they said, okay, we screwed up on the analog stuff because sometimes, as we are seeing now, technology moves faster than Congress, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So they said, hey, we messed up there. But going forward, now that this music is digital, like we just talked about, any of those streams, digital radio, are subject to royalties. It's a novel idea, paying people for their work. They say going forward for this new type of music, we're going to pay everyone that's involved with the creation. So SoundExchange was born out of that, and here we are. I don't want to stay too long on that, but that's how I got in the short and dirty of it.
I appreciate you sharing that background, and you hit on some things that are really interesting and important for folks to synthesize, to point out. This is a movement from what we think of back in the day. Folks were printing wax, right? They were printing records. They would take it to the FM radio station and say, hey, you got to play this. This is hot. And they would play it, and the artist would not get paid. Even way, way back then, it was basically seen as publicity. This is a means by which to get you out there over the radio, and there's no established means by which to get you compensated for having created that record. But it was also very hard to replicate it. I couldn't sit and listen to the radio at home and then take it to a party and play it myself, and therefore give free distribution. So it was tight back then in terms of music being distributed. It only came through the radio. But as technology advanced, you've now got satellite. I've got something in my pocket that has got an entire library. And so you've got all of these quick technological advancements that are allowing people to get access to music in ways that they couldn't before, and it just blew up. So where a person was performing a record previously and was only heard on the radio, now it's heard across all these digital platforms, and there's no way to get compensation. So the idea that an individual could get some compensation now based on these laws is
Yeah.
incredibly important. And I think this is it's a good space to underscore too, when we're file sharing, when we're using things as media on our TikTok videos, on Instagram, and all this other stuff, it's background for you, but that's somebody's work. It's like
Oh
somebody
yeah.
coming to your
Yeah.
desk at your office and saying, "I'll take that," and they just walk
Yeah.
away with it, and it's free for them. You know what I mean?
And I go back a little further. This is not technological advance, but before there was wax, artists used to go into the radio and play. So
Wow.
what happened was going back to speed and laws and technology, when like say when they call it a sound recording, when wax was invented, there were no laws in place to prevent that. So what radio said was, I don't have to ask for not only I don't have to compensate the artist, I don't even have to ask for permission to play because there's no law stopping me. So what happened was another little history buff. And around the 50s, Frank Sinatra picked up the torch and said, "Hey, people are listening to New York because I'm singing it, not because of who wrote it. It is my voice, it is my performance, and stop playing the song." So he picked up some tracks, and now we know Frank had a little muscle behind him. He ran with some different dudes, but
Right. It wasn't Arthur Anderson and with the
yeah, no,
corporate
no,
consultants.
no,
Yeah, he had different backing back in the day.
not at all. Then that happened, and then it sped up. And if you look at an old record in the spool, it'll say not for radio use. If you
Oh,
see, it'll say not for radio use, but there was nothing to stop them from using it.
gotcha. So tell me, what then does SoundExchange do? My colleagues have heard me talk about the RIAA, and the fact that my wife Michelle works downstairs for me in the DC office. And just to establish, is my understanding that the RIAA does a lot of the intellectual property protection for the industry. So the large record labels go to the RIAA, the Recording Industry Association, to do some of they're basically a lobbying shop for the
Mhm.
music industry for the large labels. What then is Sound Exchange? What do you do?
So SoundExchange collects and distributes the digital streaming royalties. So all the stuff we just talked about on how the music is digital now, there are digital platforms that are radio-like that are streamed. So for example, there's SiriusXM, there's iHeartRadio, there's tons of internet radio stations that just play music just like the radio in your car. The difference is the radio in your car is on right now. It's playing music. But once you get in that car, Damon, and you're listening to Michael Jackson, that equals a performance for Michael. Let's say I get in the car with you, you pick me up, that equals two performances. So you think of a stream. So no matter whenever you get in on the stream, it's a performance for the artist. What we do, we were mandated by the government because of those laws that were wrong. They knew this new stuff was coming. They said, "Hey, we got to pay these people. We got to do it right. You record companies and artists, you guys get together and you create something to make sure that this happening." And we were born out of that. So our board we're governed by 18 board members, 9 artists, and 9 label reps. Now, if the people that don't know, these are 2 groups that are historically at odds
Mhm.
on everything. But for Sound Exchange, they have to come together to make sure the right thing is done.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, so we collect so when the services every month, they send us 3 things. They send us a log of what they played. They send us what it looks like. It's like self-invoicing, if you imagine your taxes where you fill out things, blah, blah, blah. I did this, I made this. And then at the end, it calculates a number. So they send us a log, then they send us a statement of account of what they did, and then they send us the money that should match the log. And then from that, we pay out to the artists and rights owners or label in some cases.
That's fantastic. So I want you to make this a little more real for me. So you've talked about I get in the car, I'm one person, that's one spin for Prince. I walk into a restaurant, I'm one of 240 people in there, that's 240 spins for Prince. And if I'm at Capital One Arena or some major sporting event and they play the song to hype the crowd, is that also a spin? Tell me a little bit about that
Okay.
piece and how much is a spin? When I used to go to Kemp Mill Records back in the day, I had to buy the entire album
Yeah.
for $15.99, and that was 16, 17, 18 songs. But now I'm just sitting down and you play Prince one day, one moment, and Whitney the next, and Run DMC, and then another. How do you tell me about the volume of
Okay.
spins and how much each spin is worth?
All right. So all radio stations, internet radio stations aren't created equal. I omitted one type of service that we pay. So we collect for cable, which is, we call them those blue channels or music choice at the end of your cable, whatever you at TV station, at DirecTV. They just stream music.
All those ones
Uh,
way out in the
yeah,
900s.
those
Yeah, I got
800
you.
guys, yeah. Satellite and internet. And in some cases, AM, FM radio, they rebroadcast on the web. They have two types of broadcasts. They may
Right.
have simulcast, which is the same broadcast they're doing on AM, FM, and then they may have a new broadcast, which is totally different on the internet. So you can log on to BLS.com and get the stream, and then they'll pay for that. So you might have Bill Gates has a radio station, and then there's some little old lady in Iowa that plays her 7 songs from 5 to 6 every day. They don't pay the same rate. So when you ask me what is the rate, it is many different rates. We have rates for colleges. We have rates for religious institutions. So we have rates based on if you have commercials, if it's non-commercials. And some people have aggregate tuning hours. So some people aren't streaming all day. Like I mentioned, that lady in Iowa. So she may just do it from 5 to 6. So there's different rates based on the type of service you are. So it's hard to say what type of rate. But going to your store,
arena
your
restaurants.
restaurant example, that wouldn't be considered a per person stream. They would have a license, what we call a business establishment service, which is a BES, where they pay a different rate. It's hard to quantify what it is. But the other people where you can see who clicks in, who jumps in, that could be a per person rate. So it's hard to tell you what the rate is because it varies. That same song that Prince is playing, 1999, has different rates depending on the type of service that is being played.
So what is your role then at SoundExchange? You're in a position, you're in our industry engagement. But it's my understanding from prior conversations that you actually try to find artists who are not receiving their royalties. Tell me a little bit about this piece of the industry engagement.
Believe it or not, there's many reasons why an artist we stop using the word can't find or the term can't find, because sometimes we know exactly where they are, but for whatever reason, they are registered and they'll change banks. Sometimes the wire bounces back, or they'll change lawyers, they'll move.
But what I'm hearing is an artist has to know to engage with you. They have to register with you.
The short and dirty of it all is I need to know where to send your money and how to report to the IRS. I don't have to report to the IRS, but you don't want them getting 30% of your money. Most people don't, but I think that's safe to assume. And that's it in a nutshell. But artists sometimes don't know that this money even exists because, again, there's historical context where they just think that they don't have a right to this.
They've never had a right, so why would I suddenly know that I have a right now? They don't know what they don't know, that the laws have changed and things. I see.
Yeah, and they're skeptical. In the beginning, I used to get frustrated because that was my job. They call me the anti-bill collector. If I call you, I got money for you. I get when you call somebody and say, I got money for you, just give me your social security number and your address.
Right.
Yeah. No disrespect to the Nigerians, but we used to get that Nigerian email scam. Hey, I got $3 million I just need to put somewhere. We were fighting against a lot of those things and skepticism. And I call it healthy skepticism. You should be skeptical, but now I don't have as much compassion because we've been around 20 years. You should know or have someone in your team that knows what it is. But it still happens because there's new artists coming on every day. Like with technology, it happens instantly. We process billions and billions of lines of data every day, new
Uh,
songs. But then
that
there's group, but then there are groups. Then there's, for example, this used to be the Nightmare account, the Temptations. There's been a lot of Temptations. So when I get a log that says they played My Girl from the Temptations, I'm like, there's 70 of them dudes. Which ones performed on this particular track of My Girl?
uh,
So it gets a little nuanced.
oh, that's fascinating. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about the process of trying to track someone down and actually validate yourself with
Yeah.
them. You are telling them, I have money for you, but they are skeptical. What is your methodology for validating that you are a legitimate entity with distributions for some of their prior work?
Yeah, now we are at pretty much all the standard industry conventions and publications that's a little older than us, 100 years old, that are valid. By proximity in the work that we've done, we are validated. Yet, and still, there's a couple ways to look at this. Artists are becoming more savvy. They used to have a lot of handlers, and they were like, hands off, I'll let this person handle it. But now they're leaning in, which is great, but it's still a lot for them to do. They may take their time of getting in the paperwork correctly. The other thing is there's people, their peers that have gotten paid, and they're always getting paid. So we use their peers as validators for
Mm.
us. And that's always the best. Peer-to-peer is always the best
Absolutely. Word of
validation.
mouth. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've told me a story before of finding some of the older artists,
Mhm.
and some of them are people of color that have long lived without any real royalty being distributed to them. And these, I think of these as the folks that when I'm up late at night watching TV and there's a commercial for all these artists that have been recording for 4 decades and they're still out on the road trying to make money. It's partially because their prior contract was so terrible that they still are trying to recuperate some of the earnings they could have had if their career had been paid properly from the early days. But it's my understanding that you have tracked down and made contact with some of these older artists who are due some money. Tell me a little bit about finding these people who were previously unpayable.
Man, it was like I felt like it was like a duty and an honor to be able to, I wouldn't say I righted some wrongs, but just playing a little part in helping them live a healthy life and get in their just due. Because, like you mentioned, historically, these communities and these people were disenfranchised, taken advantage of, and all the things. The story, everybody knows the story. Now, we're talking about, I call them legacy artists. We're talking about people that don't probably use the internet. They probably don't have email. So it is a task their grandkids do. So we have to do social media. I always tell when I hire people, I was like, you're a stalker ex-girlfriend, this is the job for you. You you're gonna find out what you need to find out.
You got a skill we need.
Yeah, yeah. So you stalker ex-girlfriends, man, the SoundExchange is the place for you. But yeah, now with the internet, you can be very resourceful and find those people. But I'll tell you, Damon, there's nothing more gratifying. We pay out a lot of money. We paid out 10 billion to date. That's with a B. We pay out a lot of checks, but those little checks, man, we pay everybody, but the calls you get for sending out $1,000 or 800, and we pay quarterly and monthly, depending on if you have direct deposit. But the calls you get saying, you helped pay my light bill today. I paid my gas bill with that. I didn't know this was coming. It's almost like they hit the lottery, but it'll be to us. It may not look big, and I stopped saying that because it's all relative. There's a lot of people that we know and love that are step away from driving a cab. Nothing wrong with driving a cab, but you would think these people that gave us this beautiful art, this should not be how they should spend their golden years.
Yeah, I love this notion of basically allowing someone to recuperate losses from a long time ago, hard work that they did performing for some of the songs that we know today. And I'd
Yeah.
love for you to just take us home with a story of reaching out and locating the artist formerly known as Prince, the purple one. I think so many people love and adore Prince, and it's so sad that he's no longer with us because he had such a wealth of creativity. But you told a wonderful story of establishing contact with Prince. Just take me back to even realizing that he had royalties that were undistributed, and share just in the last few
Yeah.
minutes the process of connecting with him and what that was like.
I want to say I see what you did there when you said people adore Prince. I see that was a good little segue. That was,
Thanks for recognizing that.
so we get a list of unregistered artists, and Prince was public enemy number one. It was just whatever number you have in your head, just multiply it by 3. It was my thing, man. I was like, I got to get to Prince. We got to give him this money. He's got to know about us. So over the years, I had developed a really good relationship and still with Terry Lewis, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis fame. Terry Lewis is my boy. We talk often. His son, kids go to Howard. Someone went to GW here. We get catch lunch. Terry's a regular guy, but he's also one of Prince's best friends. So they grew up together in Minnesota, went to high school together. Like that's one of his good friends. And it didn't click to me to ask Terry to help, maybe if he can help. So one day I was talking to him and I said, man, I'm trying to get to Prince, blah, blah, blah. He said, and I quote, I'm on my way to that MF's house right now.
Wow.
So he went over to his house. Terry tells a better story. He said, look, call Sean and Sound, say they got some money for him. Then Prince started grilling Terry. And Terry was like, I don't know, man. He got money for you. You called it. I told you to call the dude. So they got into a little fun. What is it for? Why do they have my money? Oh, Terry's like, call the man. I'm just telling you, call the man. So Prince calls me, and here's how it went. His assistant called, and a number came up on my phone. It was like 12 nines thing.
No.
I was like, where? I was like, all right. I picked it up, and it was his assistant. He's P would like to talk to you. This is blah, blah, blah. P would like to talk to you. And I was like, what does Master P want? You know what I mean? Who is the P? Prince. I was like, oh yeah. She's like, I got your number from her. I was like, okay, cool. So I pulled over. He gets on the phone, and he is wanting to know, how do we get the right to collect this money? And this to go back to the beginning of our conversation. What we collect for is a statutory license, which means that the services don't have to, they just get a blanket license. They don't have to go to each individual person to get permission to, that's the way the law is written, to play their songs. But as a result of that license, they have to pay royalties. So they didn't have to ask. If you wanted to be a streaming service, you can just go to SoundExchange, and it's the easy button. I wish we could have stole that from Staples, but it's really the easy button to get started. So he was trying to grasp his head around the statutory license of it all. Once he got that, he did something that no one else has done to me. He started asking about other artists. Like he said, Angie Stone, a few other people. I was like, that's cool. He cares about them. We got it done.
He wasn't just concerned with his own money.
No, he
Once
started
he got the
asking.
concept, he said, wait a minute, let me ask about a couple of other people. That's really cool.
Yeah. So we get all that done. A few weeks pass. He gets the money. He calls me. He says, now what is this for again? Because it was all the money. I get none of this back. Hold on, no, tell me, is this real? You know what I mean?
Wow.
So it got to the point where every month Prince would call me, and I would look at my phone like, I thought my life would never be that. On the phone, he's a big practical joker. But I didn't know that at first. But I was like, I'm thinking to myself, oh, this shit is funny. And then he would laugh. I was like, oh yeah, I was right. This shit was, but it wasn't a joke. But he talked about where he performed. I mean, we all know he performed in Hills. I learned that artists give up so much. We go to the concert to hear the songs, but we have no idea what they're going through on that stage and what they went through to get to that stage, what type of pain they're in. He had back issues, and I think it's not well documented. That's part of the reason why he passed, just trying to get to a show, coping with pain and all those things. But I want everyone to realize, when we go to a show and see someone perform, really take your time to appreciate what they're giving us and think about their gifts that they're sharing with us and appreciate it.
Those are wonderful words. I think about that too. Prince, as you've said, was a wonderful example of that. I think about Mick Jagger, the Rolling Stones. There's some artists that have just been doing it for years and years, and it is practice and creativity.
In high heels.
Your body.
He was in high heels too. You know what I mean?
You're right. Sean Glover, this has been absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate your knowledge, and I appreciate you sharing with us the background of what this music industry is working on. It's super important because, as you've said, every single one of us is part of the music industry. Whether we know it or not, we're in it. So for anybody who wants to know more about you, where can we find you, Sean?
You can find me on @OneBlackMan on Instagram and Twitter.
Fantastic.
ONEBLACKMAN. But thank you too, man. You're doing a great job too, man. This is fabulous. I only did this because of the relationship, and you're one of the best, brother. So we appreciate you.
Thank you, man. Take care. All the best to you, Sean. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.